Greetings, Jelly Spoons, and welcome back to another episode of Monday Madness, the Monday show where I talk about anything and everything. And this week we're doing another musicals episode. I haven't done a musicals episode for a while, and a few people reminded me of this, so we're going to do a musical episode. And what are we doing? Well, I had an idea, and we're going with it. I asked a bunch of you guys what your favourite musicals are over on my Instagram page and my TikTok page. What I didn't tell you was what I was going to do with the musicals you guys suggested. But here we are, and you've seen the title of this video, I assume, so you now know what I am doing. I am going to be turning your favorite musicals into horror movies. And we're going to start with the most popular pick from the recent selection, which was Rent. So here we go. Let's turn Rent, the musical, into a horror movie. Content and trigger warning before we begin. This is me taking an already quite dark moments musical and making it a horror movie. This means I will be discussing drug use, death of many forms, including self-deletion. There will be dark themes of depression and guilt and grief and anxiety, haunting, ghosts, spirits, things like this. So if you are not up for listening to any of that, this is definitely not the video for you. So please skip it, go watch some of my happier content, and come back to this if you ever decide that you can do. All right, let's dive in.
Last night, I had a dream.
This horror movie version of Rent is going to centre around the character of Roger, and we're going to start the story a little way before the musical began, back in Roger Davies' past. So Roger is a musician. He is trying to make a living. He is writing songs. He's playing in small clubs and pubs and gigs and things. He's having a little bit of success, and slowly, he's seeing his music get more appreciated, and he's hoping eventually he can make some sort of career out of this. He is loving what he's doing. He is taking recreational drugs, he is getting drunk, he is going out to parties, he has some good friends, and overall he's having a pretty good, if typically rock star, life. Then, one day, he meets a girl called April. He sees her standing in the audience, watching him play, their eyes meet, and they have one of those beautiful meet-cute moments where they just think, I have to speak to that person. After the gig, he goes up to her, buys her a drink, they get talking, they then get snogging, they then get busy, and months go by and they are in a relationship. They are committed to each other, they're having a wonderful time, they've said that they love each other. Roger is still writing music, she comes out to support him when she can, and overall she fits in with his group of friends and life seems to be going pretty well. They both still indulge in recreational drug use, he still drinks and parties, he's living that rock star life, but he is very happily in love with April and she is very happily in love with him. She also does the drugs and the partying, that kind of thing, but overall their life seems fairly stable. And on their 1-year anniversary, Roger begins to write a song for April. He's determined to play it at one of their upcoming gigs if he can just finish it. He can't quite get the song finished, but she's so inspiring and she makes him feel all these things that he's trying to write this song and he's determined to write it for her. But then as time moves on and the second year of their relationship begins to flourish, April starts to get sicker. She begins to rely more heavily on drug use to get her through it, but with this comes shivers and shakes and flu and withdrawal and then using again, and it's a whole spiral. Roger is using slightly less because he's so concerned about her, and he stops writing this song to care for her. But then they go to the doctor and they find out that April has got AIDS. Roger gets tested and he has HIV, and the two of them spiral in their grief over getting this news. Time moves incredibly quickly after that. April continues to get worse and worse and worse, and while Roger is still sick, he is nowhere near as bad as she is, and she continues to spiral down and down and down. Her drug use gets ridiculous. She is trying to numb the pain from herself, but she can't do it. She is sicker and sicker and sicker, and Roger cannot do anything for her. He holds her hand at night all through the day. She has to quit her job. She can't work anymore, and Roger is desperately trying to finish this song. His world becomes a chaotic concoction of drugs and sickness and writing this song and holding her hand and loving her and loving her and loving her, but he's focusing on this song. Somehow it gets warped in his brain. If he can finish the song, it will save her life. If he can finish April's song and play it for her at last, she will survive. But of course this is not the case. And after one particularly bad night where Roger stayed up all night with a screaming, crying, coughing April, he wakes up the next morning and finds she has taken her own life in their bathtub. Roger considers this to be completely his own fault. His guilt and shame and grief all combines into one, and it just solidifies inside him that I should have saved her, I could have saved her. Why didn't I finish the song? I'm to blame. She died because of me. He begins to use drugs more heavily at this point, and he starts to hallucinate April's ghost. To begin with, she's just standing in darkened corners of the room, but then he sees her on the street, and then she's walking towards him, and then eventually she's sitting next to him on the sofa while he tries and fails to play his guitar. She's standing by him when he has a cigarette break. She walks with him to work. She stands by the window. She lies next to him when he's asleep. She's in all of his dreams. And anytime he goes near the bathroom, she's in that tub. Slowly, he loses everything. The gigs, the band he was in, the bookings, the fans, the music, everything has gone away. He's lost work, he's lost friends, and slowly the few friends who are left in his life try to convince him to get clean. Mark, in particular, his roommate, encourages him to try to get clean. And something guiltily inside him is so scared of continuing to see April's ghost that he agrees to try. He wrestles with himself the whole way through. It is a trial. He goes through a withdrawal and then uses again because he cannot stop this notion of wanting to see her, because every time he starts to get clean, the ghost disappears. And something is clawing at him, holding and pulling him back. He doesn't deserve to let her go, but also if he lets her go, does that mean he never loved her in the first place? It's his fault, it's his fault. Surely he should have to see her and bear witness to this. But eventually, after many years of trying, he does get clean and sober. He hasn't touched any drugs, he barely drinks, he doesn't go out anymore. He sits, tries to play his guitar, tries to write music, and just wallows in the grief and shame of it. But he has no ghost for company anymore. He still has dreams and nightmares, though, and he's never actually been able to step into that bath ever since. He still dreams about it. Almost every night, he will have a flash of April, their old life, and it will always end with that bathroom. And then one day, during yet another blackout that their building is full of, Mark is away and Roger is sitting by himself, still trying to play on the guitar, but he hasn't really been able to play properly since April died. There's a knock at their door. Confused, he answers it. And in a moment of shock and grief and all these feelings coming rushing back, he feels like he sees April's face. He sees her standing outside the door and he blinks, confused. But then slowly his mind starts to split in two as one part of him realizes this isn't April and the other half feels like it's hallucinating her ghost again. Internally, he begins to question, am I using again? Did I use and forget? What is happening? But then the girl starts to speak, and this girl, of course, is Mimi. She asks Roger's help to light her candle because of the blackout. He does so, but is still confused. He watches her walk and move, and he cannot help but wrestle with that part of his brain that thinks it's still April's ghost somehow. And he stares and stares, and the girl notices. He tries to explain himself, but he can't quite find the words. He tries to say, you remind me of someone. Oh, yeah? Who? She asks. Well, her name was April and she died, he says. But then he's cut across as the girl interrupts to flirt with him. She continues to press him, and in his confused state, he sort of lets it happen, but he cannot help that feeling that he's using again. Is this a ghost? Is this person even really here? Is it April? Is it not? He talks back as if she's April sometimes, but then he sees her clearly again, and it's not her. It's not her, but it could be, but it's not, but it could be. And the way that she moves, the way that she speaks, it's like a ghost before him. And still he can't remember using again, but he must have done. He must to be able to see this ghost. But no, she's a real person. No, this isn't her. It is, it isn't, it is, it isn't. And this continues all the way through their first meeting. Eventually, during this conversation, Roger notices a bag of powder on the floor. And that snaps something in his brain, and he really starts to question, wait, are these mine? I am using. Shit! But then Mimi claims the drugs her own, starts looking for them, and he realizes that not only does she remind him so much and look so much like April, but she also is almost exactly like her as well. It's like seeing a ghost come back to life. It's like a reflection. It's like a new embodied version of April, and he can't be dealing with that. He sees her shivering, he sees the fever, he recognizes these symptoms, he has watched them before, he has lived them before, he wants nothing to do with it. He tries to talk her out of it. Is she April? Is she not? He doesn't care, it doesn't matter in that moment. He tries to tell her, just stop. You're going down a terrible path. I am barely out of it, and you don't get out alive very often. Just don't do it. But she insists. She's a bad girl and she can do it, but she's so young. And he has to let her leave. She won't listen to him. The hallucinations start up again after that. The cracks in the floor, every drip of water through the roof. The apartment is screaming and alive with April. He can hear her voice, her footsteps. He feels like he can see her again. He doesn't see her completely. The taps drip blood in the bathtub anytime he goes near. Anytime anything runs down the windows, it looks red like blood. He hears the footsteps walking around, but he can't see her anymore. And this drives him even further towards the grief and sorrow. And somehow Mimi is still there. She has befriended his group of friends. She's showing up more in his life, even though he told her, I can't do this. He tells her over and over again. He tells his friends, no, she reminds me too much of April. They say they don't see it. He says, no, it's too much. It's too much like that. I can't do it again. I won't. I can't. But they don't see it. They say he needs to come out again. He needs to be himself again. He needs to live life again. They all have this refrain of live for today because you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. And while a part of him wants to say, yes, I understand, the other part of him says, not like this. I don't want to live like this. This isn't what moving on looks like. This isn't what healthy looks like. They only have one really healthy friend, and even he is saying, no, come out. You should give this Mimi girl some time. At one point, Mimi breaks into the apartment. He hears her creeping around, and he thinks it's April, the ghost, back again. He gets out of bed, opens the door, and then there she is. It's April, but no, it's not her. It's Mimi again. She's standing in the apartment and she's flirting with him and she's doing all the things that April used to do, and it's endearing in a way, but so terrifying because the footsteps are still echoing in his mind even as Mimi is standing still. April is still there somehow in his head, in his mind, and he tries to tell Mimi to leave. He tells her to go. He says he can't do this. And then all of his friends are there with her and they're telling him, no, it's fine, do this, live again, live for today, live for today. And he's saying, I can't. And he's shouting down at them as they stand in the street, holding on to Mimi, who's befriended them all. And he feels in that moment as though everyone he knows has turned on him and they're trying to drag him back down into that place he fought so hard to get out of. He stands on the balcony of their rotten apartment, looking down into the street. And in the nighttime lights, all the street lights flicker. And he sees the eyes of all of his friends and Mimi, and they seem to glow like bright demons in the dark. And as he looks down and he hears their calls up to him, the thought enters his head, I could just do it. I could jump. And part of it is I could do what they're saying. I could jump and I could join them and I could just go back into that life again. And a part of it is I could jump off the balcony. And he doesn't know which one he wants to do. Eventually, it all just happens around him. His world becomes chaos and noise and so many people. He tries to write, he tries to focus on that. Mimi gets closer to him and sometimes he just lets her because it feels so much like April and he thinks himself weak for it, but the guilt and the grief just allows her to get little inches closer to him. And sometimes just having that company is a strange sort of comfort, but also a reminder of all the bad that he perceives he has done. He's still trying to write and it's still not working. But more people are coming into his life now. His friends, he can't quite recognize them anymore. He feels himself withdrawing, but they keep pulling him back out of his shell, taking him out with them, doing things. Their apartment is full and busy of other people who have nowhere to go. This person shows up, screaming and dancing about the fact that they had a dog murdered and got paid for it. He can't understand as his friends cheer and clap along with them, and everything feels darker and scarier as the roof is caving in and their rent bills are racking up and they are burning everything that they own. But the one thing he can't bring himself to burn are the pages of the song he wrote for April. It's unfinished, and until it's finished, it's just too precious. He's dragged out to celebrate the night that their new friend shows up, talking about murdering a dog. And while out, everything becomes just so much. There's chaos and colour and wild riots and dancing and singing, and he lets himself get swept along with it because maybe if he goes along with it, maybe it will feel all right again. Maybe just letting go and letting yourself wash away with the tide, maybe it's easier at this point. And then, in a moment of calm, he goes out to the back alley to take his medication, and Mimi comes out to join him. And in the dark and the moonlight, she looks so much like April. And then she takes her own medication out as well. And he learns that Mimi has exactly the same illness that April had. And as they take their meds together, Mimi gets closer and closer. And he sees flashes of April's face, of April using, of the times they took their meds together, of her getting worse and spiraling, that bathtub, again, them kissing in the park, them at gigs, her watching from the crowd, and then Mimi is too close, and then he's kissing her because it could be April, it could be. And he allows himself to get wrapped up in that thought so much that it carries him through, and he keeps kissing her. Another year goes by, and to Roger it is as a flash. Every time he blinks and opens his eyes, another season is around him. Mimi is closer. They're in bed, they're cuddling, they're having sex. He's playing his guitar. He's trying to get money. They have no money. They're cold. They're shivering. They're taking their medication. Mimi's taking drugs. He's following her down the street, seeing her using, picking her up, putting her down on the bed, looking after her. They're cold. They're shivering. He's playing music. They have no money. It spirals round and around and around. As spring becomes summer, becomes autumn, and then it's cold and it's winter again. And he is trying so very hard to stay clean, but it has never, ever been this difficult before. And a huge part of him, a big voice in the back of his head, says if he uses again, he will see the real April, not this imitation of her that he has in his life now. But another part of him doesn't even think he deserves to see her anymore, partly because of what he is doing with Mimi and partly because he still feels that guilt and shame for what happened to her. He doesn't want to face her. He doesn't want to see the upset in her eyes when she sees this other person that he is being with. But also maybe she'll understand because it's her. He can only ever see her in Mimi. As his thoughts are spiraling and winter is closing in, they get locked out of their apartment building. They have to break back in, but everything is gone. Everything is missing. He still has the pages of the song he began writing for April, but that is it now. He has those pages, he has his guitar, there is nothing else, and the world is black and closing in, and he can hear the footsteps of April, and he can't bear the thought of her walking around that abandoned apartment building by herself. Where is she? He can find her, he has to find her, but he can't ever see her except in Mimi's face. He stays clean though. He stays and he stays, but it doesn't seem to be doing anything. The hallucinations are almost as bad as they were when he could see the ghost, when he was using. The sounds all around him, he can barely sleep. Mimi is using harder and harder. She's shivering more. It's colder and darker. His friends can do nothing. Mark is filming everything he doesn't understand, and it gets too much. He has to leave. He sells his guitar, and he gets out. He runs hard and he runs far, and eventually he sees the sun. And he manages to settle down into a tiny little life. He works a tiny little insignificant job. He has a tiny apartment with some roommates he barely sees, but he can see the sun at last. He starts to think about playing in the future. Music and tunes come back to his head. He takes long, long walks down beachfronts and he just breathes for the first time. And the only time he sees April now is in his dreams. And he doesn't dream of that bathtub anymore. It's only their happier memories, their happier times. And he begins to think that maybe he can use that. He can use that somehow to finish the song, maybe once upon a time down the road. And eventually maybe he can get something back again. But then, mere months later, he gets a phone call from Mark, and he's calling him back home. Mimi has gone missing. Everything is going wrong. Everyone is scared. They need him back. Why has he gone? Why has he left them? He needs to come back. And as he puts the phone down, the ghost of April appears right on the side of his vision. And he turns to look at her and he has to go back. He runs immediately and he is home within a matter of days, back in that dark, dank apartment. And he can hear April's footsteps so close. As he walks, she's behind him. But anytime he turns, he can't see her there. but he feels so close to her now. He's enraptured by it. He can't uncurl himself and get out. He has to stay. He's staying for her. The grief has built back up again. He feels sad that he escaped, that he left. He feels guilt and horror and shame for that, and he's back this time to stay. He will not abandon her again. This time, he'll do it better. He'll do it different. Somehow he can save her. And he starts trying to work on that song again. When he's not playing, he is out with his friends searching for Mimi. They still feel as strangers to him, almost like there's a veil keeping them from him. He doesn't understand, but they look and they look and they search over days and weeks, and they cannot find her. They search all her old dealers, but no one has seen her for ages. She has quit the rehab she apparently went to, and no one has seen her. As he tries to finish the song, he has to change the key. All the chords, the tune, everything about it, it becomes split and fractures off into a different song, but with the same chorus words. He can finish it though. He can still finish it. It will work. Maybe he can save Mimi. He can save one of them. He can finally do it. And he tries to finish this song. And then, one day, they find Mimi. She's half dead in the streets, but everything is loud. Maureen and Joanna are screaming and shouting at each other, as they always have been. The noise. Mark and Collins and everyone, it's talking and chatter and all the problems and the filming, and it's filmed. And Mimi is there, and she's gasping for breath, but she's alive, almost. And they bring her back to that dank apartment, and they lay her in the bed, and they warm her with blankets and clothes, and they all sit around her as Roger tries to finish this song, and all he can think is those flashbacks of April in the same bed, covered in the same blankets, dying, and he had to save her. Maybe he can do it this time. And he can hear her voice, and he can feel her standing right behind him, and he tries to finish this song, and then one day he does. And it's not the same song anymore. It's cracked and broken. Some of the lyrics are the same, and it's a completely different tune, but it's finished. And as he looks up to try to play it for the first time, he sees Mimi lying on the bed, and she has that April face bathed in the moonlight again. But Mimi is dead. It's too late. She's gone. And that is when, much like the song, Roger's mind fractures. The room becomes darker. Blood is dripping down the windows. The rain is hammering red droplets. He can hear the screaming cries. He can hear footsteps on the tiles of the bathroom. He can hear her sitting in the water. And he's thinking, no, not again. I couldn't save her. Not again. And as his brain breaks inside, his soul screaming, he sees April lying in Mimi's place. He watches her eyes open. She sits up. She turns to look at him. She smiles. She offers him her hand. He rises too, the papers of the song scattering around his feet as he walks, leaving his friends covering the dead body of Mimi over with a blanket, and he follows the ghost of April into the bathroom. And he follows her and follows her and follows her until she reaches that tub. She turns off the taps which were running, and she sits herself down. And he lays next to her, his head resting on the porcelain as he holds onto her hand. And in the silence, you just see blood start to drip down her arm and onto his hands. And he starts to cry, and the tears that come out are bleeding blood too. And that's where we leave him. Completely broken and shattered by this repeating over and over, and he couldn't make it work. He couldn't save either of them. And at the end of this story, Roger is going to die, and it can be in one of two ways. I can't decide, so let me know what you think in the comments down below. Option number one is that he flings himself off their balcony, much like he imagined himself doing during the quote-unquote song earlier on. The second option is that he refuses to leave when his friends leave to take Mimi to go and do the funeral. And then he's still there, holding onto the side of that bathtub days, weeks later, as the bulldozers arrive and the whole crew comes to tear down the buildings to build the new stuff. And no one knows he's in there, and he dies in the demolition with the ghost of April. So that was me turning the musical of Rent into a horror movie. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. And do you have any other musicals you would like me to turn into horror movies? Let me know in the comments down below. I do have a real easy idea of how to do it to Dear Evan Hansen, but I mean, it's not very far off from being a little bit of a horror movie in places anyway. But if you have any other ideas for me, let me know in the comments down below. I will be continuing with the OC story over on Friday, so tune in for that one if you're still sticking with that series. And yeah, thank you for all your suggestions. I love you all very, very much, and I will see you later on. Goodbye.